All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to DAO Talk Weekly. This is DAO Talk, your one-stop shop for everything DAOs. This is episode number 46. I'm Tommy.
And I'm Frisian.
I'm coolhorsegirl.
Hey,
Oh,
welcome to the cast. We have a third co-host now. Double the trouble now on DAO Talk Weekly. Cool Horse Girl is now a full-time host on DAO Talk Weekly. CHG. For those who haven't been along for the ride on DAO Talk for a while, who haven't seen your episodes where you've hosted before, give us a quick background on who you are, what you do. I know that's kind of new now, what you do. Give the people a little taste of what they're gonna see coming in the next, 50 episodes of DAO Talk.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's good to be on here. I previously worked for Index Coop for about 2 years, running a bit of a mix of on-chain and off-chain governance. I'm happy to have made the full-time jump to on-chain governance with Tally. For the past year or so, I've worked with Tally, writing the newsletter, working at Content Guild, and then just freelancing across the ecosystem. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. To hear my voice on a podcast is going to be a bit overwhelming, but I think I can get over it. And then, yeah, look forward to a lot of, say, first and foremost, like me trying not to use swear words. And then beyond that, hopefully a few hot takes. Not too hot, right, guys?
We get hot and spicy in here. It can get a little crazy.
You do
on
get
DAO Talk.
spicy in here. Some of them I've used DAO Talk as background content sometimes, just walking around. And then you hear the hot take and it's like, oh my God, yes.
Yeah, Frisian
yeah.
goes
We,
hard.
we both, Tommy and I also need to work on using less swear words. As Tally ascends to being a product that the whole ecosystem depends on, I think we probably need to button it up a little bit. But yeah, I've definitely been known to drop an F-bomb or two on this.
a few
on this
more
program.
a few more episodes with swear words. Yeah, that's good news. It's a welcoming environment. I feel safe.
I don't know if I'm ever going to stop saying fuck, but I'll try my best, Frisian.
Don't change.
All right. All right. Well, Frisian's only going to be here for a little bit of this pod, so let's jump into the technical stuff before he has to drop. Rocket Pool, Frisian, walk us through what's going on in the Rocket Pool world. And for those who don't really have a full grasp of what Rocket Pool is and what the staking ecosystem is, drop a quick breakdown and what's going on in that ecosystem from an on-chain perspective.
Yeah, Rocket Pool, pretty cool. Kind of like Cool Horse Girl. The puns will never stop. So yeah, Rocket Pool is it's a staking protocol, and it includes a liquid staking token. So you can stake your ETH with Rocket Pool, and you'll in return get a new token that you can use, to participate on chain. So the liquid staking token is called RETH, and you can use RETH. You can sell it anytime. It's liquid, but you could also use it in DeFi as collateral and things like that. The thing that's unique about Rocket Pool is their architecture is much more decentralized than other staking options in the ecosystem. It's permissionless to run a validator with Rocket Pool. So anyone can come and run their validator and allow other people to come and stake their ETH on their validator. And so they have this really huge validator set. I think it's hundreds of validators at this point. It might even be pushing 1,000, but definitely hundreds of validators. And this is compelling because, ultimately, the validators control Ethereum, right? They're the most powerful entity in Ethereum. They get to decide what gets included, what transactions get included in blocks. They get to decide, if there's ever a contentious fork of Ethereum, which fork is the one that is the most legitimate. So they're the most important entities in Ethereum. And so when you have protocols where there's sort of more of a small concentration of validators, and then a lot of people have given their ETH to those validators to participate, it poses centralization risk to Ethereum. So like the exchanges are like this, like Coinbase, the Coinbase is the only one running the validators, right? So there's some concentration there. And then also Lido is kind of part of the way in between. So they have a much broader validator set than someone like Coinbase. They have more like 30 or so validators. And it's all on chain. So it's like, I guess, more transparent and more self-sovereign than something like a Coinbase. But Lido is like Rocket Pool is a whole nother step in that direction towards like permissionlessness and decentralization. We like all the staking services. They're all good. You kind of want to have like a bunch of different types for people to participate in. But Rocket Pool is kind of like a very essential protocol they play a very critical role in maintaining Ethereum's decentralization on a high level. And they've had a DAO for quite a while, right? So Rocket Pool has been governed by a DAO for many years. I think Rocket Pool was originally an ICO, and they've had the DAO for a long time. But now that Rocket Pool has become like more popular and more critical, I think there is a very strong desire on the part of the ecosystem for Rocket Pool to be as robust and decentralized as possible on the governance layer. So they have this one DAO called the PDAO that allocates the treasury and makes a lot of important decisions about what to do with the RPL token, which is like the governance token for Rocket Pool, but also plays a role in the operations of the protocol. And I think to date, the PDAO, I'm not sure exactly how it works, but I think it's been more of like a off-chain voting and then like multi-sig kind of election controlled model. And we're seeing a number of protocols in the ecosystem kind of re-examine that model and its viability, and kind of looking at moving towards more of an on-chain governance model where the token holders directly control the treasury. And if there's elections, the token holders like add and remove, signers and office holders and council members on chain. So that's what Rockpool is looking to do here. This paper is really interesting because it looks at like how they can integrate the staking aspect of the protocol into the elections, or into the on-chain voting mechanism. So yeah, excited to dig in more with their team.
We talk a lot about like going from zero to DAO or zero to on-chain. But I think we're kind of starting to see a shift in maybe just the way we talk about DAOs, or what we're seeing from larger protocols, like shifting from, being a DAO to being even more decentralized or more robust and having more robust on-chain governance. And this is one of those instances of that. Way more technical, way more high level, way more gigabrain, but just as important moving forward, to see this happening from, something as big and important as staking on ETH. So super exciting. Virgin, I know you have to drop, so I don't know if you want to say a goodbye to the cast before you drop, but
no. Yeah, this is going to be a 3-person collab podcast going forward with CHG. It'll probably improve this episode once I'm gone. So everyone enjoy that, and I'll see you next week. Peace.
See you, dude. Peace, man.
Bye, Fridge.
Now that that's gone, we can go crazy. Do you have any thoughts
Kids
on this?
only. Yeah, I'm actually excited about this because so many of the elections, whether it's like really publicly broadcast, like this one would be, and even like the ApeCoin DAO one was, where like there's a full voting structure, and the more private ones, like at InexCoop, we had just like a Discord vote of who's gonna be the pseudo president type of person. It's exciting to see the further decentralization because it's not going to be one centralized, but also like a popularity contest. I remember in 5th grade, I like vowed to never run for anything again that I wasn't guaranteed to win, because I lost due to the popular kids, which I guess in a way it's a cringe example, but in another it's like just a tale as old as time. Winners of these elections often have 100,000 followers on Twitter. So if you really want to get involved in Rocket Pool, your Twitter following probably doesn't um, connote your ability to make decisions for Rockable. So this should be good stuff. All the more reason to go on chain, decentralized.
Yeah, something Frusion and I were talking about a couple of days ago in terms of like how we want to like highlight people on DAO Talk or highlight, users in the DAO ecosystem is it's super easy to just highlight the people with massive distribution, massive followings on Twitter. Like you have your 50, 100, 150,000 follower person on Twitter. That's a major delegate, but usually the people that are moving the needle and who have thought about things the most, who have thought about on-chain governance and thought about DAOs and thought about decentralization for that particular protocol the most are these people with like 200 or 300 followers on Twitter who are just working in silence in the DAO, who don't really care about the limelight. They care just more about the protocol and the code. And so we're trying to make a conscious effort to uncover those individuals and cover those minds and interview them and highlight them. Cause I think what they're thinking about, what they're building and their perspective is super important and valuable to the rest of the ecosystem. Like we think about our CTO Raf, like from my perspective, like Raf is one of the smartest, most knowledgeable people when it comes to governor and on-chain governance, but no one really knows who he is because he's just behind the scenes grinding, building tally and writing. So it's going to be interesting going forward. How we highlight those people, how we make an effort to do that, because I think, those are the people that are gonna, who are making the change. Like you can look back in history in any industry and the people who aren't heralded usually are the ones who are, the ones making actual change. So super interesting to see. I'm excited about, it just seems, we talked about it last week, like just like the on-chain movement kind of reaching not a crescendo, but it's starting to move, up a bell curve and into more of the limelight, in crypto Twitter and in the industry as a whole, which is something like we predicted a year ago, but like, you never know, right? Like the writing's on the wall, but like,
definitely. Yeah. The tides are changing for the judgment against off-chain. I even remember like a few years ago, during like peak, bull run, going to some like conferences and people would like fully rely on Snapshot, even be doing these like Discord votes, have absolutely nothing on chain, still call themselves a DAO or any other sort of crypto DeFi, we claim we're decentralized thing. And no one had any problem with it, including like me, now I've seen the light, so no worries. But yeah, it's crazy. So it should be good. I think not just for like Rockapool as one, but also the movement in the ecosystem, which will ultimately be for the best because you can't change your mind when it's on chain, which is probably good for accountability.
So speaking of our CTO, Raf, he wrote a blog post on Tally's newsletter about 2 years ago called "The Case for Governor Alpha." If you are listening to this podcast and you don't know what Governor is at this point, how? Governor is standardized by Open Zeppelin, but is essentially like the main smart contract that pretty much every DAO worth its salt in terms of like true on-chain DAOs are running. So about 2 years ago, Raf and our co-founder Dennison had this theory, this is the smart contract. This is the governance primitive that DAOs are going to run on in the future. Therefore, Tally was built to support DAOs that use Governor. So every DAO on Tally on our front end runs on Governor. But 2 years ago, there weren't many DAOs that were using Governor, let alone using Tally to run their DAO. So we resurfaced this article this week because it's just kind of cool to look back on how, over 2 years ago, March 16th, 2021, we released this piece on the case for Governor Alpha, having the foresight to see like, hey, here we are now where, the on-chain movement is starting to ramp up and kind of peak. It's just kind of cool to see we had the foresight, to attach our horse to this smart contract. For those who aren't particularly like versed in Governor, it is, like I said, a smart contract that allows DAOs to vote. It is super simple. It is decentralized. It is battle tested. Something you've heard us talk about over and over on DAO Talk, how essential Governor is for the on-chain DAO movement. People think, myself included, when I was, when I joined Tally and started to learn about it all, like it was very complicated, or I needed to be a dev to understand it or to implement it. But, since I've joined Tally, I've launched multiple DAOs using Governor. It's super simple. We even have like a 45-minute tutorial from zero to DAO, that I'll link in the show notes. But, the thing that makes Governor so not unique but so powerful is it is super simple. So for something as simple as like Content Guild, where you just paying creators post publishing for their work, you just need people with governance rights to approve those payments for those creators. You can just use Governor just to have a simple propose, vote, execute function. And then you can do something as complicated as Rockable, like we mentioned, where if you're watching, you're literally looking at these insane calculus level equations about weighting, governance, and delegation and whatnot. Governor allows everything, and it is constantly being built and extended upon. And there's always new features and things that Tally is working to support. But there are a lot of parts of Governor that Tally doesn't support yet because they're constantly being built and they're new. And DAOs are still experimenting with, how they want to use them and what they want to do with them. But the Governor ecosystem is absolutely massive. Like, I think if you're just listening and you're not familiar with Governor, think of any large decentralized, like truly on-chain decentralized DAO. 99% of the time they're going to be using Governor. So we had this tweet from Monet Supply responding to someone who's talking about Governor. Yeah, many of the top DeFi projects, including Uniswap, Compound, and Fei, use Governor. Seems common for Governor projects to also have multi-sigs for grants, operations, active investing, and keep most funds in the Governor while delegating just what is needed to multi-sig committees. Which, CHG, I'll get your thoughts on this in a second, but like, it is moving away from that small committee, that popularity contest, like you were saying, where there is a lot of failure points with multi-sig. So we've talked about this before. That is like a form of concentration and centralization of power. If you can remove as much reliance from the multi-sig as possible and use something like Governor, your DAO's in a much better spot. What are your thoughts on like Governor as a whole? Like, is it something you're recently familiar with? Is it something you think a lot about, or is it pretty new since you've joined Tally?
Yeah, I think it's a cool thing because it's one of those things in like crypto DAOs that you don't know that until you know, if that makes sense. So I think my biggest I've learned about Governor for 2 years, but I've really learned about Governor in the last week, by like reading through the docs that Frisian sent me. But all that said, like I've been using Governor on every DAO that I've ever voted on chain with. So it makes a lot of sense. It also is so simple, which is like the very coolest thing. It's interesting reading that post from Raf also. He's like all the things about Governor that he sort of predicts in the future, like, oh, Bravo's coming, and like it is so simple. Those things haven't changed. So it's like 2 years later, and we're just now seeing everybody hop on the train, which is cool. It's also, if you've seen that meme that's like, I predict that like Bitcoin's gonna hit 1 million, and if I'm wrong, I will delete this tweet. Like the threat. This is cool to see an actual bit of a friendly "I told you so." That Tally's really like laid their foundation right on top of. So yeah, super definitely bullish on Governor, of course.
I just come back to a lot of like the things in the DAO space. Like, if you just use your brain and just have common sense, like usually you can predict a lot of the things that are going to happen or the things that need to happen. And this is one of them. It's the most simple, but effective, implementation of like voting, and reflection of how, people vote in real life.
Yeah, it's dangerous to use multi-sigs. I mean, we've seen so many, like that one episode where you guys dug in deep to it. It's all sort of, you could have predicted but maybe not if you're so deep in the space and you want to be on that multi-sig, and you're probably taking, you could be getting paid to be a multi-sig signer. So it's maybe hard to see when you're so close in, but when you step back, like you just said, it's like obvious. Governor's the obvious choice over a multi-sig with three people
Yeah.
that sometimes have 100,000 Twitter followers. And do you really think they're the best ones to make decisions for your DAO? Like, hopefully, because everyone voted for them.
Yeah. It's like, how do you remove the the hubris of humanity, of human nature, um, or like limit it as much as possible? Because I think like the DAO experiment, everyone the zealots are always like everything needs to be code, take humans out of it completely, but like that's just never going to happen because this whole thing is like using code to enable better forms of human organization and labor organization. So it's like, hey, how do you allow the DAO to operate in the most efficient way possible, but also, limit the amount of error or human error, maybe not error per se, but human greed, human hubris, like I said, from the system as a whole, which you're never going to get away completely, but, the more you can, hard code that, the better. And Governor has done that, just because it's super simple and just reflects the way organizations have worked forever. It's just adapting to the smart contract environment, the crypto environment. And that's why it's continually being built upon and why, there's always these new extensions because new use cases arise. And Tally supports them all, or we work to support them all, in the long term. So another tweet here from DRC, who was hosted with us before with CHG and I, Kyler. Another list of not just DAOs using it, but platforms building on Governor. Boardroom, Nouns DAO ecosystem, DAO Lens, Scopelift, GFX Labs, Open Zeppelin, who, built the original, Governor contract with Compound Finance, Tally, us, Agora, Safe, much more. And there's a lot of new features, new deployments coming from the ecosystem as a whole, like Arbitrum, OP, Rockapo we mentioned earlier. So super exciting stuff from that. CHG, going right into a piece from yours truly, the decentralization dilemma from Tally's newsletter last week. We talked a little bit about it on last week's pod, but since there is no Tally newsletter this week, I want to get your take on this piece. Since we have the author of the piece here right now, what give us the breakdown, the quick summary of it, what's going on in the decentralization world? We talked a little bit about it with the Rocket Pool and Governor DAO, but what are the juicy deets on the street right now?
Yeah, so I use the example of ApeCoin DAO, but it happens in like almost every single DAO. There's a like constant paradox of we need to get things done, and that probably requires some degree of like, can it be completely flat? I don't know, but it requires some degree maybe of, I don't know how to put it. Centralization is maybe the most positive spin, because you could even say hierarchy. So things need to get done. You require someone telling another person what to do, right? But then it's also a DAO, so everyone should have an equal say, right? But this kind of comes to a crux when you talk about like leadership teams within DAOs. Lots of DAOs use the pod structure, where there's often a pod leader or two pod leaders, which decentralizes it to some degree. But what about when you start voting for like in ApeCoin DAO, special counsel and then president? At Index Hoop, we had a similar structure where we had someone who was like the big dog with no specific title, and then a few people who were like the executive board, and then everyone below them. So there is a huge hierarchy, even though everyone may have this one token, one vote. Then it gets furthered when people start delegating, especially when VCs that have millions and millions of tokens start delegating, and they obviously delegate to the people that they're in contact with constantly. So it's unlikely. It's like the popularity contest that I talked about. It's unlikely that, Galaxy Digital is going to delegate to some random person in the DAO, even if they're thinking about the DAO 24/7 and they really do have a good grip on what's the right direction of the DAO. And maybe they have some, education or experience that puts them in the perfect position to be delegated the most tokens in the DAO. But those are obviously going to go to these executive boards and presidents. So it's tough with that. I mean, another example that I threw in the newsletter was the big decision over Jira versus Asana of what like project management software to use when they're literally the same. Like I was in charge of the like analysis between the two, and I'm just putting a check mark in every single box, like, you know, like easy to use, good UI. It's like, yep, they're all good. And we had weeks go by of like you're unable to do something about it. You can just all you can do is like try to rally other people, but that doesn't change the fact that it goes to a vote, and that vote's usually going to be made by the people with the most amount of tokens. So when people talk about decentralization, they a lot of it is like the most stuff I believe in the very most, but some can definitely lead to paralysis. Some interesting takes on Twitter here.
Yeah, going into that directly with a tweet from David Phelps. Not cancellation, not censorship, not a woke mob, not people choosing for themselves who to be their leaders. The term is sovereignty, decentralization, consent of the governed to delegate as they please. If you don't believe in it, then you don't believe in DAOs. And he follows it up. And if you don't like your DAO, you literally can fork and leave. This is the optionality beyond any we've ever had with states, and to present it as censorship reeks of hero worship. This is a tweet from about over a year ago. So it's a pretty poignant, another like little prediction of the space as a whole, but David's always spot on with what he's talking about, from like a social perspective within DAOs. Someone responded, "Gigachads aren't ready, sir." It's crazy. This is anything like a hot take. Consent of the governed is a term that was coined in 1290. And yet we have people despairing that those in power might owe their power to the people who back them. Yeah. I mean, thoughts on this? Like, it kind of goes directly into what you're saying, but like, this is not a new concept, and, to push back against it when there's like tech that is now enabling like, kind of like the little guy, or the rights of the people, the rights of the governed. It's pretty nuts. Or like the dissonance between those abusing the power versus those trying to fix it is pretty crazy. Like the fact that this is a hot take is pretty crazy. It's not a hot take.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's another one of those things where it's so easy to see his point, and then you think of like your lived experience, and it's like, well, I was pissed about that someone was the president and they made decisions I didn't agree with. The same as, you know, like normal like American democracy. People are always going to be pissed about who's in charge of them. But in DAOs, it seems like we actually have a chance. Like you just said, there's technology that enables the little guy. And it seems like my ending take in the newsletter was we should try to decentralize as much as we possibly can and iterate on that rather than starting out with this like CEO plus executive board. Otherwise, what's the point?
Ending on some, you know, just the hot topic of the world right now of DAO Twitter. It's not necessarily related to DAOs, but it kind of is, because it kind of applies to, like DAO platforms and fragmentation of DAO platforms. But Twitter competitor from F-Book, I'm not going to say the whole name, launched yesterday, Threads. So we're going to monitor that and see how that goes. But, Tally will be active on Threads. We'll be active on Threads. So if you're over there, come say hi. We'll see if it sticks around. But a tweet from Chase Chapman, which we seem to have every episode. The ability to port over followers from other platforms is bizarre. It's something we talk about a lot in Web3, but who I am on Twitter is not who I am on Insta. Different contexts. Still think portable data is net beneficial, but weird to lose so much context across platforms. Something I think a lot about. I didn't really realize I think a lot about it until this whole thread scenario in this tweet is like, yeah, who I am on one platform is very different than who I am on other platforms. And I'm like pretty intentional about trying to cross pollinate like, my friends on Instagram versus my friends on Twitter. Just because I think like it's net beneficial. Like she says, like I tweet a lot about my I post a lot about my personal life and fitness on Instagram, but not a lot on Twitter. And then I talk a lot about like the decentralization and DAOs and crypto and tech and culture on Twitter, but not a lot on Instagram. So I try to like cross promote, take a lot of my tweets, put them on Instagram, take a lot of what I post on Instagram, post it on Twitter. It's just interesting. Like, I don't know if there's an answer here. It's kind of just like a wider discussion of like, it's interesting how context is lost across, each platform. And maybe like she thinks it is net beneficial, but maybe it is good that it's siloed. I don't know. Like is the opening of, different pockets of your friend group and your life good or bad? I don't know. I know she like you're pretty like open and out there. Like, what do you think? I know, and you're pseudo anon, like I'm not. So
Yeah, I just like I cannot imagine you're on Instagram and you see like someone making a LinkedIn-esque post. Like something comes up on your feed that's like, them in front of the Google office and it's like just joined my first day at Google. I'm so inspired by, and they're tagging like the people who interviewed them. Like how weird would that be, right? I mean, but I think I'd like to do more cross pollination, but who I am on different platforms is very different. And to some degree, I'm like super scared to show one platform what's on the other. I think if my LinkedIn followers knew how much I like swore on Snapchat, they'd probably think different of me than they currently do on LinkedIn, and that's intentional, like you said. Some of these tweets that we are about to pull up are so funny about this reality of there being so many different social platforms. When I started thinking about this topic, I was like, okay, what do I have? And I don't even think of myself as having that many socials, but I'm counting them, and it's like, oh my God, I have Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat. And that's the very beginning. I mean, you can count so many of these. Like you can count Discord and Slack and Telegram and all these messaging ones that have some degree of social aspect. Spotify now as a social platform. So it's like a slippery slope, maybe. This tweet is my absolute favorite. Let me read it. This is from Thread Guy. Okay, I'm just so proud of finding this one. This is from Thread Guy. I was searching Twitter for like threads cringe, like threads embarrassing, and he says, anonymous crypto MFs doxing their personal Instagram accounts for 15 followers on threads with the like tears pouring out emoji. which is so true. I mean, that would be me. I'd be I'm like pseudo anon on Twitter, and then I'd be doxing my personal Instagram for hopefully 15. I mean, we'll see, right? I wonder if it'll be like Facebook, where like all the boomers that live on Facebook will finally have a Twitter where where like via threads.
I don't know, have cohesive like finished thoughts on all of this. It's just an interesting like idea and concept, especially like Twitter as like a arena for like personal expression, but also professional expression. It's something I always try to walk the line between, and I think it's good because then it like lowers the barrier between. It's a fine line to walk, but like your work life versus your real life. I think it aligns the individual, the worker, the laborer, more with the company, and like it treats it more as like a family. And I know it's dangerous because at the end of the day, it's a business, but I think, any like job if anyone's ever had a job or has a job that they like going to or like doing, I think the work itself is important, but as important as is feeling like you're part of a team. And I think, Twitter, no one really talks about it, but like Twitter helps that, right? Twitter is, a playground or a garden for you to like express your ideas and to find your team. But it goes both ways, right? It could hurt you at the same time, but, I don't know. It's all very interesting. The social aspect, the infrastructure aspect of DAOs.
It's a lot of like I like it in theory, but I don't know about in practice. Are you getting a threads? Do you have one already? I guess is the greater fear.
Yeah, I have one. I have one already. Yeah.
And then are you just cross
I'll link it.
posting?
Maybe not. I'm going to try it. We'll see. I'm not jaded enough yet till they'd be like, no, we're not doing it. Maybe I will be after this experience, but we'll see. Who knows?
Yeah, we'll keep you updated on Tommy's threads experience week by week. Yeah, I'm curious of whether people will just cross post their old like their stuff on Twitter to this to,
Please
or
don't.
it'll be well,
Yeah, like
what's a
it
company
needs to
gonna
be
do?
different.
Like have a different, but what's a company gonna do?
That's true. Like you just port them over, right? Like it's like you can have an aggregation app to just post everything across all platforms. I mean, we're looking at a tweet right now. It's like 5 different tabs open and it's the 5 different Twitter clones that exist, like Blue Sky, Threads, Farcaster. I know it's called something else now, but like, it's like, okay, like writing's on the wall. Let's make a prediction. In a year, one of them's going to exist, and maybe they all exist still, but like one's going to like tangibly exist. That's like has actual users in an ecosystem, or they all just go to hell. Anyway, that is a lot from this week. A lot of conceptual takes, a lot of conceptual discussions from the space, from a decentralization perspective, from a DAO perspective, from a social perspective. A little bit of everything in this week's DAO Talk Weekly. We'll have everyone back, the whole crew back next week, all three. Again, sorry about the sound. If the sound is a little off this week, we'll get back to normal soon. As always, we'll see you in the next one. DAO Talk episode 46 this week. We'll see you for episode 47 next week. Peace.